Hey, are you ready to grow your business? You have checked out the number one resource for business leaders, entrepreneurs, startup founders, and managers. And we're going to teach you how to grow and scale your business with real actionable steps. There's no fluff in this podcast. It's just good advice. Check out this episode. If you're a first-time listener, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And if you enjoy this episode, leave us a 5-star review. Today's episode, I sat down with Jonaed Iqbal, who's the creator of NoDegree.com. He's also the creator of the NoDegree podcast, which, hey, what are you doing? You got to stop this podcast. You need to go download that one and listen to his latest episode over there. Jonaed was incredible. We really hit it off. One of my favorite guests as of late. I think you're going to love this episode. Here comes your good advice. Hey, thanks for checking out another episode of the Blake Benz podcast. I got Jonaed Iqbal on the show today. He's the founder of NoDegree.com. He has his own podcast called the NoDegree Podcast. This is the guy you want to talk to if you want to get a killer resume and be an awesome interviewer. Jonaed, thanks for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, and it's so funny. You and I have never talked before, so this conversation could go anywhere. Why don't we start with, let's talk about NoDegree.com.
So, it's in the name. I help people without college degrees find meaningful jobs that pay well. I started it just because so many people without college degrees think they don't have a lot of opportunity. And I'm not talking about the pyramid schemes and those things you see on Craigslist. I'm talking about legitimate opportunities where you get paid well, you have a career, you have career progressions, you can make good money, and you provide value to society. So it's like a lot of these jobs are not things you think about off the top of your head. Like, who thinks about becoming a claims adjuster when you grow up? But the fact is they do provide value, and when you're helping someone with a claim, it's good. So it's like I like introducing people to different careers. That's why I launched the podcast, to interview those without college degrees and have them share their story so others can get inspired by it.
Yeah, well, and so let's just go straight to the meat of it, man. I'm just going to drill right to the hard-hitting question.
Yeah, let's go. I'm ready.
Is college for everyone?
Of course not. And just because I'm the founder of NoDegree, I'm not anti-college. I just think that colleges are in the business of education. So you have to, it's a business decision when you go to college. A lot of people don't treat it like a business decision. They treat it like, hey, I'm just going to drop this much money, no plan, and I'm going to go. Like, if someone's 18 years old, they've always done well in school, they have a plan, they have a scholarship, I'm going to say go to college. That's the right decision for you. Now you get a lot of people who are like, hey, terrible in school, didn't pay attention, they didn't like that stuff, and then they go to college. What they do is they spend 2 years on their iPad in classes and drop out. Mm-hmm. That's someone who's not. And then there are other people who are hardworking, but it's just not for them. It's just it takes them longer to get the same grades, and they prefer working with their hands, or they're just better at other things. It's like you put me on a dance floor, I look like an idiot. You asked me to do a resume, I'm good at that. People have different skills, and that's fine. Yeah. You need all types of jobs in society. And the fact is, yeah. Go ahead. Go and finish. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I get excited whenever I'm like, I'm all about it. I saw the excitement. I had to stop. Yeah.
So I used to be, 10 years ago, I was a high school teacher. And I remember it was inner city Houston. And man, there was just like, the big metric was we're going to have 100% of our kids accepted and committed to going to a 4-year university.
Oh, man.
And I just remember thinking and actually, here's what's really wild. We had a welding program at our school.
Oh, thank you so much.
We were moving this group of kids towards getting their certification, and there was a lot of pushback. It was like, no, we need to get them enrolled. And it was like, there was this weird deal around, do we really want to send these kids to college when once they have their certification, they can already be earning great money, they can already have a great job. But instead, there's this weird dialogue around, if you're not going to college, then you're not as successful. There's something wrong with your career path.
It's like, it's crazy, because if the kids were passionate, if the kids were doing well, that's what they wanted to do, why would you stop them? Obviously, look, there are pros and cons of every career. So, they should know what they're getting into, but why stop them? It's like, why turn that kid who's a great welder and turn them into someone who's going to go 2 years, get the loans, and drop out? And they're probably still going to go back to welding. right? So it's like, why waste 2 years? And the fact is, you never know, because some kids may weld 3-4 years and they're like, look, you know what? I actually want to go back to school because I know I can progress further as a welder if I get my degree in construction management or if I do this thing. And now when they're going, they have more direction. 18-year-olds a lot of them are aimless. I see them all the time. There are 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds that are aimless. The worst thing to do is tell someone to put them in the institution that doesn't guide them well, that doesn't really have the resources, because I know the career services at most schools, they suck, right? I do resumes for a living. I don't think I've ever seen a resume that was very good out of college. You know, I just don't. You see okay resumes, some of them are not, you know, it's not like they're all bad, but it's just like, why is there pushback? You know, it's like there should be pushback. There's no pushback against the prices, because if you commit to having every kid go to school, you know what a school's going to say? Good. I'm going to raise my prices. That's all that happens.
Yeah. Well, and you know, it's funny because like, and you know, and just like you, I'm not anti-college. I mean, I have spent so many years in college, and so. And
as a teacher, you need to, right?
Yeah, you know, I mean, and people, and it's, you know, and again, I think sometimes we have to break the stereotype of people who don't go to college are breaking the stereotype that they are less aspirational, that they have less motivations, that they have less desires. It's not levels of achievement. It's not, people who really want to achieve go to college and people who are just content or average don't. I think breaking some of those stereotypes are important. The other thing, though, that's a bit interesting to me is, and you said it already, it's like the timing of it. Like you have an 18-year-old who, and here's what's wild, man. What I do for a living, I didn't go to school for. And yet I spent so many years in college, right? And I've seen this trend of so many people who they went to school for blank, and yet years later, they're doing something totally different. Has nothing to do with their degree, nothing to do with their, you know, nothing.
You know, that's one of the reasons I bought wrongdegree.com too. No, because it's like the most important lessons. I always ask this, and the answer is typically the same. Think about the most important lessons or lesson you've learned in life. Did you learn it in the classroom? The answer is always no. And the fact is, it's like there's so many skills. You don't learn how to present properly in school. Communication, and you know, teamwork. Yeah, you have group project. Group project, all it means is one or two people do the work and the rest slack off. That's every group project in college, and I have yet to see that. It's rare to ever find a group where everybody works, and the professors don't even help you. They're like, "Oh, figure it out." It's like, I really can't. This guy's holding my grade hostage, and the guy knows that, and he doesn't care as much as you. Yeah. And it's like all these other skills, like how to find things, how to be creative, how to hustle, all those things you're not going to learn. I'm not saying you don't learn anything in college. I'm just saying that there are important lessons that college cannot teach you. Right? It's just it's a bubble.
Yeah, I would say you will learn a lot, but they will not do a good job of anchoring what you learn to like the actual tangible practical. Now, what
you have to do that? You have to do that yourself.
Yeah, unless it's like, you know, obviously I have to go to law school if I'm gonna get my law degree. Unless it's something like that.
But you know, interestingly, I spoke to lawyers before, and they said while you learn a lot in law school, it's so different because let me tell you, there are lawyers who play poker with the judges, the relationships. You don't learn that in law school. There's a lot of bribery. There's a lot, you know, all those things that you just don't learn. There's only so much you can learn. I'm not saying that law school, you don't learn a lot, but, you know, I think that there should be many alternatives because I think law school, you pass the bar. In some states, you can actually become a lawyer without a degree because my thing is, if you can pass the bar without going to school, you are smarter than the people who are going to law school because you're doing it yourself. You're picking up books. You're doing independent research. I just think there should be more ways to just become something because if you have and the thing is, if you don't allow someone who passes the bar to become a lawyer because they need to go to law school, then the bar shouldn't be what they need. You know, it shouldn't be the thing that you need to become a lawyer, right? It should be something else. They're saying like, this is not good enough to be a lawyer.
Well, and let me say that. Let me say, especially for like the listeners, here's what we're not saying. I'm not saying, you know, college is bad, wrong. You know, we're not talking about, and even like sometimes I get, man, Jonaed, I have sometimes like 18-year-olds who are so hungry and they're like, man, I think I've gotten accepted to this university. I have a scholarship. I'm thinking about just dropping out and just chasing my dreams. And I'm like, man, you're passionate and you're energetic, but you need to go.
I'm going to tell them to go. You're going for free.
Yeah, you don't have any traction there. And really, you just feel an energy, but you don't really have a plan. You don't really know what you're doing.
Yeah. Because that energy, I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
That energy is very different when you're broke. You have made $0 for 2 months. And then you see other people who have a stable job. So it's like, you better have a plan. I don't care what you do, whether you go to school, whether you don't want to go to school, you have to have a plan. There's no way around it.
Well, and if a listener is listening and thinking like, how dare you? Like you're attacking our greatest institution, keep in mind that we're entrepreneurial here. And like one of the biggest gems of entrepreneurship is looking at something that's always been done a certain way and saying, hey, maybe there is a different way. Maybe there is a better way. And maybe there is there are multiple paths to success. And maybe there's an answer that's different from what a lot of people think about.
Yeah, and it's not like I said, there are plenty of schools that are affordable. Like I'm a big fan of state colleges; they're affordable. But then you get these schools that are charging $40,000 a year, and it's like, think about it from a standpoint: $40,000. And it's funny. There are professors who teach at state schools and private schools. The classes are different prices, yet it's the same professor. Mm-hmm. And if you really want to go down into price, why does Harvard cost the same as some school middle of a state that people rarely visit, that like a flyover state? Think about it. If you had a Toyota Camry cost the same as a Ferrari, you're gonna be like, what are you talking about? But all schools are around the same price. That already signals there's something wrong. If you go to Harvard, you get a different value, you get different name recognition, you get so much more for your bang than if you go to some school that charges the same that no one's ever heard of. Right. So right there, you should be questioning. Always question things like, why is it the same price? Is the money going to the professors too? Like, if you're paying for a class, you're paying for the professor. I'm pretty sure you could tell the professor, look, I'm going to pay you. Me and like 5 guys are going to pay you this much. Can you coach us privately? You're probably going to get more value out of that. And then there's think about it. Why does an advanced class cost the same as a low level class? Right? They shouldn't. You don't get the same value. Why does your swimming class that's like 3 credits cost the same as your senior level taught by a world renowned professor? Again, you really have to question these things.
Some of this stuff is like and I already know that like there's people who are like in the upper echelons of society, so to speak, if I can use that like obnoxious term. Yeah. Who they're choosing where they're going based on like the brand of it, the networking of it, what have you. But I remember, it's funny, I had forgotten about this, so you just mentioned this. When I was in high school, I was thinking about what college I wanted to go to, and I looked at one on the East Coast, and I remember it was $45,000 for a year. And my local university, I had a free ride. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, it's a no-brainer. But what I realized was, and again, I'm not knocking any particular institution, but I remember talking to people who were coming into college and saying, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you're going. Go where you can go, but start focusing on your career rather than worrying about, does this university have what I need? Does it have the program I need? Chances are it's got it.
Yeah. So look, I will say it does matter to a certain extent where you go, but again, it's a business decision. So let's say that your school is free, the other school was $2,000 a year, but that school was known for that program. Then I would say, you know what? You're only paying $8,000. You get more than $8,000 difference in value, right? The other school has more than an $8,000 premium. But now the thing is, even if the other program is better, but now it's $45,000 a year, is it worth $200,000 more? Or can you make it up through other ways? Because, they talk about the networking at these institutions. Like I went to Columbia, right? World-class network. I know how to network for free. And all the best connections I've made were by me going out there, me following up with people, this and that, right? Columbia is just, honestly, it's just like an added bone. They're like, oh, so I guess you're smart, but the fact is, it's like, the type of people, you don't need to prove to people you're smart, right? The people who know what you're about, the people who know what you bring to the table, they don't really care where you go, right? When I'm helping someone find a job, they're not worried about where I went. They care about whether or not I can get them a job. And if someone has a PhD and they're writing your resume, but they can't get you a job. And, it's funny, I've seen people with PhDs and their resumes were terrible. So it's like, there's so many aspects of it.
Well, and, PhDs are really meaningless.
Yeah.
I mean, they really are. And I say that as a PhD candidate.
Yeah.
It's meaningless. Anyone can have it. Anyone can you can pay online and get one.
But it's tough. I'll say it's tough. Man.
Well, I mean,
the grind is tough.
Yeah, the grind is tough. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I had some PhD classes that I for sure was like, okay, this is so basic. Like,
yeah.
you know, but
Okay.
but I've had some that were just phenomenal too. But the point that I'm getting at is if and maybe this is just for the listeners, if you are chasing a degree just to have it, if you're chasing a title just to have it,
so sad.
Yeah, you're gonna miss it. You know, there has to be more meat to your plan than the title, the position, the, you know.
Because it's like, okay, you graduate, you get your degree, then it's like, now what?
Yeah.
You know, it's literally, you know, it's like, you know, it's just that point. Like, I'll be happy when I make 100K, or I'll be happy when I make this amount. You get to it and you're not happy because you're not fixing the core of the problem.
Right.
And I see it all the time. And, you know, those people end up being the unhappiest because they believe that the degree is going to solve all their problems. It's going to bring them this satisfaction. But that's not what the degree does. The degree is a tool. It's a means to an end.
It's the channel.
And it's a channel that you can, for some people, it means getting the degree, some not. But it's like, you know, I just want people to really, really think about it, because most people don't think. They just sign their life away, and they don't realize that when look, 200K in debt, you could be making 200K and you'll still take a long time to pay it off, because 200K, right? Then let's say you make 200K after taxes, you're losing out like a third of that. Then you got living expenses. Then you got that. So even if you're cheap, you could pay it off in 3 years. But most people are not that cheap, where they're going to eat rice and beans and microwave ramen, right? It's going to take like 10 years, and it's just like, it's not the same, right?
And that's another like really bizarre. I remember I gave a presentation on basically like student loans and debt. And I was
like 1.6 trillion.
Oh, it's ridiculous. But I was talking to some students, and it was so funny because I opened the conversation with, how many of you would like to graduate with $20,000 in debt? And no student raised their hand because they were like, heck no, 20 grand. But the professor raised the hand.
Yeah.
And then I said, how about 30 grand? The professor raised the hand. I said, how about 50 grand? And the professor was like, yeah, totally. That'd be so cheap. And the students were like, you're crazy. Why would you ever? And I was like, and at the time, I can't remember what it was. This would have been maybe 10 years ago. The average debt was something, I think like the person was on average graduating with like 78 grand in debt.
Oh man.
And so even at 50 grand, you're below average. I mean, you're beating the statistic, but it's really strange also how people get locked in the system of, now I'm financially basically, you know, I'm on the hook now for these massive, and here's what's really crazy too. And I think, you know, this actually is a strike against universities. I don't think universities do a great job of educating people on the loan process and really what they're getting into. Because I even had a guy who, he spent 80 grand his first year as someone living on campus. And I said, man, how did you do this? And he goes, they just kept giving me money.
Yeah.
And so I just kept, I'm an 18-year-old. I just kept, you know, and it was like,
that's the worst. Like, you give an 18-year-old, if there was a program where it says all 18-year-olds can take out 300 grand, let's say they can take out 300 grand to buy a Ferrari, and a Ferrari costs 200 grand, I guarantee you Ferrari would raise their price to 300 grand the next day, and all 18-year-olds would buy it.
Oh, I remember when I was an adjunct professor, and I was meeting with some other professors, and we were trying to figure out how to help this student who had gotten such a large loan amount that he had somehow taken that cash and bought a brand new car with it, and was like totally broke. And we were just, and you know, him just being an idiot, but also all of us trying to figure out like, okay, how do we help this kid now?
Yeah.
It's like totally,
you know, it's like giving a 2-year-old an iPad. It's like giving them crack. It's like, what do you expect? It's, you know, you fill out this online form where you check boxes like, hey, I'm going to,
and you don't know.
Yeah. You don't know. It's like,
you're just like, okay. Know. Yeah.
And it's like, the fact is, why do all majors cost the same price? You know, an engineering major versus a humanities major is not going to yield the same results. It doesn't pay the same. So it's like, you know, I just want people to really think about what they do. Like, if I told you, hey, Blake, I'm going to open up a deli and I'm going to borrow 100 grand to open up this deli. And you're going to ask me, oh, what experience? Why? Like, oh, no, I just thought it was a cool idea. Like, my corner store looks cool. And you're going to be like, you're an idiot. But this is what so many, you know, thousands upon thousands of kids do every year. And it's sad because when they get out, and I talk to people, it's not the majority of people, when they hear me, they're like, even people who went to law school, they feel ripped off by school, you know, which is sort of a bad thing. And it sucks because at one point in the 90s, you didn't pay anything. You could major in music and you could get the best job, right? You could get any job. And now it's like the same degrees. You can't even get like, there are people working,
I mean,
the English degrees at Starbucks, right?
Yeah. I mean, our work culture's also changed. And like, I'm sure you've probably seen this picture. I put it out maybe a few months ago, but it's, you know, looking for applicants,
Yeah.
paying minimum wage, masters required. And it's kind of like, so I can't blame people, especially our generation and younger, feeling ripped off, because there are business owners out there who what they're developing in terms of requirements are totally, it's detached from reality.
Yeah, because
look, it's different.
Yeah, in the 90s, secretaries didn't require college degrees. Now all of a sudden, secretaries require college degrees. But it's like, what? I seen job postings where it's like, oh, do the catering, make these phone calls, schedule meetings, this and that. It's like, are you serious? You need to go 4 years to school for that?
Well, there was also, I saw, I came this on LinkedIn or somewhere, but it was a job posting for a programming language, and it said 10 years, 10 years experience, and the language had only been out for like 4 years.
Oh man, you see, I need 10 years of experience in Microsoft Office, 2018. It's like, come on, you got to be serious. And the fact is, a lot of the secretaries, what they do is they go to these, these BS schools like the University of Phoenix and these other schools where they're online degrees, and they get their degree. So it's like, so you required the degree, they got this BS degree. It's like, what's the point? You would have, their time would have been better spent on anything else that would have upskilled them in some other way.
But it's, man, and here's the deal. I empathize, because it's not anyone's fault. No one other than like your voice. No one isn't coming alongside and helping. And here's what I've realized: it's not young people. It's not. I'm talking maturity wise. Because I can think of how many entrepreneurs I've talked to who've said, dude, I just talked to a guy last week. I want to open a restaurant. I want to take out that massive loan. I have zero restaurant experience. And restaurant and the restaurant industry, man, it's cutthroat.
It's cutthroat. Oh my God.
The most amazing people are going to fall on their face because it's cutthroat. The margins aren't great and it's tough. And so you have this guy who's like, hey, I want to take out, how can I make this business successful? And I'm like, dude, you're playing with fire, man. And he's 45 years old. And so there's this weird disconnect where it's not just young people, but like people are really
all over. Yeah.
They're trying to make these big decisions and they're not getting, I don't know if we're just doing a bad job educating people in general, but it's
a mix. Weird. Look, I could speak 3 hours on all the thing because it's the parents, right? Because our parents grew up in a time where all the people around them who went to college got really wealthy. Right, they got really successful because they got the highest job because so few people had it, and it was a different time back then, and it was cheaper. Now, what happens is, the parents they'll be like, "Hey, why don't you just go up and give your resume to the business, to corporate building?" It's like, Dad, I'm gonna get hit by security. I'm be arrested. Like they give advice that was meant for that time. Like you have John D. Rockefeller. He got a job because of his handwriting. Today, your handwriting is not going to get you the same job, right?
Yeah, and your application is going to get read by a bot that's either going to put you in the pile of read again or throw you in the shredder.
It's just going to throw you in the shredder. So it's like they think about the time. So now what happens is, so the parents are actually one of the biggest culprits. The parents and employers, those two have the most power. So the parents say, my kid has to go to college. I see so many parents, my kid has to go to college. And it's like, why? No, he has to go because, their kid goes, I know successful people. Now, the issue is high schools have to respond to parents. So if the high school gets pushback, because if a high school is seen as, they pushed the kid not to go to college. Oh, no, I can't send little Timmy there. I got to send him to the other school that has this enrollment. Because the high schools are so focused on the numbers, because who cares about the numbers? The parents, right? And that affects their enrollment. Enrollment affects their funding. So the parents have a big impact. Now, parents send it because they hear union employers require jobs. So now it's the employers who require them. All the employers that require a bachelor for every secretary position is at fault. Because the secretary does not need a bachelor's to do what they do, right? And the thing is, these old industries are really at fault because tech has realized, like, screw this. If I want the 19-year-old who developed an app at 17, I can't put him in college and lock him in a cage. I need to nurture that talent. I need to get him early. So tech has realized.
Well, and that is such a mind-blowing call out right there of you're talking about an industry that has exploded in the last 10 years, probably to the point where it's overvalued. But I think you're so spot on. It's that willingness to innovate beyond what we've always done.
Yeah.
Exactly what you're saying.
And the beauty of it is, because I do a talk about this called The Future of Education. Historically, you needed centers of learning, right? You needed everybody to be in the same. There was no internet. And even when there was internet, it was not everybody had access. And I'm pretty sure you remember dial-up. You couldn't watch a YouTube video. It'd take like a whole week. And then someone picks up the phone and you're done. So it's
Yeah.
like,
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
and then so I'm dating myself, but I'm not too old. But so you needed these centers of learning, right? You needed like the books and the line, but now it's like things are moving online, right? And the beauty of it is, as things move online, it becomes more accessible. So if you have someone in a wheelchair, yes, he can physically go to university, but it's not the same experience for that person because it takes them 2-3 times as long to go to classes. They have to figure out which entrance they can use and which buildings they can go through and go. They have like underground tunnels. For that person, when they learn online, they get a better experience. So they don't have to adjust their day. You give someone like ADD, you can't put someone with that like in a 3-hour lecture. Then they have to make sure, I have to take my meds this time or this and that. Maybe for them, they need to do blocks, right? Some people just learn differently. So I like the fact that things are moving online and it allows flexibility for people to learn different ways. And in tech, I love that at the end of the day, it's like, look, can you code? Can you do this project? That's all that matters. It doesn't matter how you got it, and we can quantify it. So the fact that degrees are required shows an inability of industries to qualify their candidates. So they qualify them by having other institutions who still aren't good at qualifying candidates, right? Because at the end of the day, most managers don't know what is a good job. So then they just hire people from school. It's like, well, that kid went to this school, he majored, he must have been good. And that's not right. You have to have like concrete ways, and there are ways to evaluate, but it requires managers and employers to be good at what they do. And most of the time, they're not good at evaluating people at how they do.
Yeah. I mean, I literally just talked to a guy 2 days ago who he was talking about how he's evaluating his employees, and he had like, man, it was like a calculus equation. He was like, I got this scale, and it's like from 1 to 11, and if they do this, they're a 3. And I was like, man, your people have no idea how they're judged, how they're evaluated, because I can't even make sense of the system. In your mind, it makes sense, but
and it's like a lot of people have these archaic systems, like even like the time. I need someone who comes in early to work. All right. And I asked them why, because, this early shows this and it shows this. It's like, why don't you just ask them to show that? Right. They always use proxies like the degree to show something else. Why don't you evaluate on that something else? If you want someone who, like a programmer, right? They want so many things, but then they realize, like, at the end of the day, if you can develop the app, it doesn't matter what time you come in. It doesn't matter. Right. So they try to evaluate some skills based on other factors, but those other factors are easier to quantify. It's easy to quantify when someone comes to work. It's easy to quantify when someone leaves work. The harder thing to do is to quantify how productive they are. But there are ways to do that. It's not a punch in, punch out, right? Because I see so many people, who is like, yes, they always come in early to work. They'll leave on time, but they're not good workers. And then you get the guy who comes in late, but when he's at work, the guy's, automating things, doing this and that.
Here's the story that will blow your mind. I just read this last week or the week before. A woman asked, she said, hey, I want to know, I have this one employee who, and they're all hourly. She's got like 10 people. Yeah. I have this one employee who he finishes his work around noon. And in the afternoon, I catch him like watching Netflix. I catch him like, playing on his phone, all this stuff. I want to know if I need to fire him because everyone else works the whole day. Yeah. I just don't know what to do. Yeah. And I can't remember if this was on Quora or wherever this was, but the reply was just genius. Yeah. It said, so basically what you care about is someone working the whole day, clocking in the morning and clocking out in the evening. And what you're doing really is you say he's the only one who finishes faster than everyone else.
So really everyone else is bad.
Well, exactly. Or you have everyone else who's figured out if I finish early or I do a better job, I'm going to be punished for it. Yeah. And so you have a guy who basically is too naive to realize how to play the game. Yeah. And so when you think of it that way, now, okay, it's actually less about the clock in time or even the work hour time. What it's more about is if this person can complete this much work and do it good in 4 hours, how do I now scale that in a way that makes my business even more profitable, even more successful, instead of being so addicted to, it's got to be these hours, it's got to be like this, what have you.
So you know what I would, and this is how I would approach it. Look, give the guy 2 options. You say, look, you can go home at noon and finish your work if you want. Or look, if you want to do more work, I can double your salary. Or what do you want to do? That's how you do that.
But people don't get that last one. They say, oh, I'm going to double your work. Well, why would I pay you more?
No,
and they
no,
don't,
no.
they're detached from that for some reason.
And the thing is, what's going to happen is, look, if he chooses to go home early, now what happens is, do you think he's ever going to look for another job? He gets his work done in 3-4 hours. He gets paid. He gets to do stuff. You think he's ever going to leave? You know how much turnover costs businesses when you have to
Right.
hire someone again and you have to retrain? Business owners don't focus on the hidden costs that they incur. They focus on the things, oh, I can see he's not working for 3 hours. That's all they can see. You don't realize that when he leaves, now you got to retrain someone. They may even take 2 days to get the same amount of work done. So you actually save money by having him work a half day versus hiring someone else who clocks in and doesn't get their work done.
But man, it feels like, and I mean, I'm literally working with business owners. It feels like people, they lack the long-term thinking there. Like you're talking about playing the long game. And I don't mean that in a superficial way. It's just, it's understanding, okay, it's actually more profitable for me over the course of a year than it is to really ride this person over their hourly wage.
Yeah. It's also the long game, but it's also a lot of business owners tend to have an ownership mentality in that they think they own their employees. And the fact is, there's this famous TED Talk. He said he succeeded as a comedian when he realized his role wasn't to get laughs, it was to give laughs. Business owners who realize that they're giving employees something and employees are giving them something, they're the ones who really make it they make it better. They're the ones who get the most value. But business owners who purely see his clock in and they're looking to take out of their employees, I'm looking to take someone who does this. They just cannot think long term, right? They may think long term about themselves, but they cannot think long terms in terms of what's best in the long run.
Well, and so what's even weird about that, man, I see a lot of ego, and it's almost like this really frustrated boss who's like, you owe me this, you owe me. And in some ways, like, I get, it's not a charity. I get it. It's a business. There should be accountability and there should be expectations and your people should do a great job. But like, here's a great way to think of it. I don't know if you saw this, but there was the real estate company who gave out $10 million in Christmas bonuses to their employees.
I heard that.
$50,000 per employee.
Yeah.
Wild. Because they said, you guys did a great job. Here's your bonus. Well, so I started talking about this concept.
Yeah.
And what I found was another owner was like, well, why would I need to give a bonus to my employees? They owe me 110%. I shouldn't have to monetize that. They should.
They don't owe you anything.
Exactly. And it's like reframing your thinking into understanding like, no, it's not a charity. No, you're not just, doing something that they'll roll, they'll walk all over you, but understanding that your salary or your hourly wage that you pay them is the least of what you can be doing for them. Not like your God's gift to their life because you gave them a job.
And I see that so much. It's like, first of all, no one owes you 110%, right? They only owe you what you pay them, right? Yeah. So that's really, nobody owes you more than that. Now, if you want to get more out of your employees, you give more. And the fact is, you can pay your employees in more ways than just salary. Let's say, I don't know if you have kids, so if people have kids and hey, I'll let them come in later so they can drop their kids off at school so they don't have to arrange this. That's a way of not paying them, but you're paying in salary, but you're paying them in convenience, right? So having work flexibility, again, for some people, if you ask me, people would easily take a 10% pay cut to be able to work from home. You see that all the time. And again, now they get more sleep, better rested employees are
more productive.
Right? They're productive. So it's like all these things you really got to figure out. And the fact is, employers need to have honest conversations because people prefer different things. Some people prefer to leave at noon, or some people prefer to make double the salary. Everybody, depending on their lifestyle, depending on their needs. And employers, if you want to get the most out of your business, humans come first. Right? The tech is important, all that stuff, but it's the humans who really take yourself to the next level. They're the ones who keep the business well-oiled. Just like a car, you got to lube it, you got to treat it, you got to maintain it, you got to make sure that you do the things. And it's your business. And if you don't do that, like I said, you're just training your employees to go to your competitor.
Yeah. and they're going to thank you because your competitors are going to thank you for giving them your talent, basically.
Yeah. And look, people like I'm not saying everybody. There's some people who are like terrible employees, but good employees, they'll value you. They'll be like, look, they'll stay at places for extra, because look, it's not worth a raise if you're going to lose so many other benefits, if you know. So it's like, employees are leaving because it's like, look, they're not happy. I remember I worked at this place and I got all my work done. I used to automate things. I used to do all that. And, I did a lot of things that other people had not done before. Now, this was like a contractor for the government. So let me tell you, I'm not a morning person. And that's one of the reasons I'm an entrepreneur. I don't like waking up early. And I used to come late every day, but I would stay later, right? I'd make sure it's not like I used to clock in, clock out. I used to make sure I met my hours and I did work during those hours. I got a note saying, hey, that you're supposed to come in at this time, this long lunch. And then from that day, I was like, look, all right, I'm looking for my next position. Mm-hmm. So they cared so much about this strict timing and this and that. When it's like, you lost an employee, now you got to hire again. Now you got to do the other stuff. Now it's like, why? You that's what happens. You pay, and it's definitely more than, I think it costs like 30% of a employee salary to hire. So you're saying that it was worth it for you?
I've heard something. Even larger. I've heard even percentages over 100% in terms of not just the pure cost to hire, but like the time it takes in terms of what you're paying that person's salary. The time it takes for that person to get back to where the previous employee was in terms of productivity.
If they can ever get to the
exactly. And what's crazy is I was talking to somebody just last week who they said, man, we're hurting because we lost this talent and we really couldn't lose this talent because we didn't have a way to replace this person, but they've left now and now we're stuck. And so that's where the cost really gets painful, is where it's not even an equation of training a person. It's like now you have to also find that person who was just as hungry, who was just curious, innovative, and the cost of that. Sometimes people can't pay that. You can't put a price tag on that.
Yeah, and then it's like, could you have paid the employee more? Right? It's like there's so many things. Did you do your part to keep the employee? Sometimes you literally can't because the opportunities they have elsewhere. But it's also another thing for your business that you shouldn't have to rely on such a rock star for your business to run. Because even if he doesn't leave, he could pass away, whatever. There's so many reasons why he could get hurt, whatever. There's so many, or he or she. So it's like, you can't rely, like a good business does not need they have good execution, good processes, but they shouldn't need like a key person, especially if you're a business owner, unless you're that key person. And even then, you should always have a succession plan. You should always have like a way, because a successful business is one where people can be removed and other people can come in, and it can still, obviously doesn't have to work the same, but it still has to be able to run, right? It still has to move.
Yeah. Well, I mean, credit to Steve Jobs and Apple. I mean, he died and Apple's still around. Same thing with Sam Walton in Walmart. I mean, Walmart is doing better than ever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think you're spot on. And
same thing. Bill Gates left Microsoft, and now they're, it's like, look, obviously
to crush it.
You got to be able to move, right? Imagine if Bill Gates left Microsoft and all of a sudden it just tanked. It's like, come on, what'd you do?
And there's some great stories. I mean, Rubbermaid's a great example. Rubbermaid went bankrupt. It doesn't exist anymore. All that exists is the brand that someone else bought.
Wow, interesting.
It's not around. And it's because the CEO, who was a total rock star, they went from literally on the top of Fortune's most admired companies to bankrupt, sold off, gone within 7 years of him leaving.
That's crazy.
I mean, it's just wild. And to your point on like, if your business can't survive because of this one person, it's funny. I talked to a guy who was a business owner. This guy was all sorts of crazy, but he had an employee who was pregnant, who needed to go on maternity leave. And he was asking me for advice, which I don't do any kind of like HR consulting, but he was asking for advice on how can I deny her maternity leave, which I was just like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Like, take care of your people. What are you doing?
Yeah.
But the thing he said was, I literally cannot survive without her here. And I said, if that is true, your business is broken. If you need this person to the point that you would deny their maternity leave, your business is broken.
It is broken.
But it's a blow to your ego, right? It's tough to hear that. What's easier is I'm going to just hire out another person. I'm going to just hire, I'm going to look for ways to get around this instead of actually thinking about the long game.
Yeah. And I think same thing. It's like, so let's go back to the earlier point. We talked about the degrees and the education. Again, no matter what decisions you do, think about the long game, whether you're in business, whether you're getting a degree, your life partner, all that stuff, these big decisions that impact you for the rest of your life. think about the long game, because the long game is no matter what, the people who play the long game are the ones who win. The people who sort of look, even your health wise, right? Whether you want that chocolate cake or not, right? That's a long game thing. I mean, it's a tough long game, but it's a long game. And over time, eventually it does come back to bite you.
Yeah. Jonaed Iqbal on the podcast today. Jonaed, you have just crushed it. I can't believe we're out of time. Like we're going to have to talk again at some point and get more of the story of NoDegree.com.
Look, I could talk for a while. Appreciate you. Thank you for having a good conversation. Thank you to the audience, whoever listens to this. If you want to get in touch with me, you can check out the No Degree podcast on NoDegree.fm. I'm on LinkedIn. I think he'll put in the show notes. Feel free to send me just send me a personalized request. I get so many requests. So if you told me that, hey, you listen to this episode, that's the best way to get my attention. And I appreciate you.
Yeah. For the listeners, I'll put the links to the LinkedIn, NoDegree.com, and the podcast. That'll all be in the episode description. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, feel free to drop a 5-star review, share with the podcast with a friend of yours, or subscribe to the podcast itself if you haven't yet. Jonaed, thanks again, man. And I appreciate you. And for the listeners, we will catch you next time. See ya.
See ya.